Awesome. Thank you everybody for joining us for our very first Digital Alberta webinar. We have an awesome panel of speakers joining us today. And as you know, our topic is Beyond Entertainment, Interactive Digital Technologies in Industry. We really wanted to be able to shine a spotlight on some of the really cool technologies that are traditionally more in entertainment and gaming, and how Alberta is leading the way in kind of bringing some of those things over to the more industrial sectors. So as these technologies improve, we're seeing a mass adaptation across all industries. And Microsoft actually did a report that showed that 75% of healthcare organizations and 80% of manufacturing organizations are now using immersive solutions in some capacity. The global AR market is projected to grow to 77 billion by 2025. So there's an absolutely massive opportunity there. And everyone's probably heard the stat from Calgary Economic Development at some point or another, but there's $20 billion projected to be spent in the province on digital transformation from 2021 to 2024. So some of the companies that will meet very shortly are part of that huge digital transformation spend. So just a couple little housekeeping items before we dive into our Executive Director, Alicia. So if you could just keep yourselves on mute, feel free to throw anything you need to into the chat, any questions, comments, and I will ask them to our speakers as we get a chance to do that. And then at the end, we'll have more of an open dialogue with a question and answer period. So with that, we would like to turn it over to Alicia Peters, our Executive Director, to give a little bit of an overview on Digital Alberta.
Awesome. Welcome, everyone. It's nice to see we've got some members in the audience, some board members, of course, on our panel as well. So we're just happy that you took some time to spend with us this morning. And we're excited to share a bit more about our organization and, of course, get to the awesome speakers who are going to, share their views and kind of give us an overview of immersive technology. And it's going to be a great conversation. So to share a little bit about us, our organization. So we've evolved just as technology and the ecosystem has advanced over the last 15 plus years. What was once really traditional marketing routes has now expanded, and Digital Alberta has become the Interactive and Digital Technology Industry Association. We're member-based, we're nonprofit, and Digital Alberta is made up of companies creating immersive digital experiences and products, and the services and organizations that support them. So our why, really, it's, Paisley alluded to it, there's a really big economic opportunity at hand, and we have amazing companies, local in Alberta that are scaling, developing, solutions that are exported around the world. Interactive digital media itself contributes 5.5 billion to the Canadian economy. And when we think about, what our role is, it's really about supporting, inspiring, and advancing the interactive digital technology ecosystem. And we ask ourselves the question, what does it take to be an innovative, connective, and inclusive interactive digital technology community? So we're fortunate to receive funding from our partners at Alberta Innovates to act as a catalyst for the interactive digital technology industry, and really act as a conduit between government, academia, and industry. And so over the next year, to continue to expand our work, we're going to focus on a number of areas, and that's really our engagement with post-secondary institutions and how industry informs curriculum development, micro-credentialing, internships and co-ops, and exposing students to the pathways that exist in the great companies that they could work for in Alberta in the sector, as well as how we're raising the tide. So working with partner organizations, we're really interested in collaborating as we think about how to advance the ecosystem. So, if your organization would like to talk, we'd love to explore opportunities to work together, and as well as how we're making our ecosystem accessible and possible. So you'll see some programming and training that's going to be launched in the new year around equity, diversity, inclusion, how we, create pathways for underrepresented communities and create more gender parity in the sector, as well as what we're doing today, which is showcasing, the awesome organizations and companies that are leading interactive digital technology in our province. And we want to shine a light on that, both, what we do locally, but also how we represent the IDT sector, both nationally with organizations like, the Entertainment Software Association of Canada, and then globally as well. So in terms of, who we serve, we're in a unique position in Alberta in that we've got, a concentration of decision makers and headquarters here across a number of primary industries in how we feed and fuel and heal and move the world, in addition to the growing sectors in IDT around gaming and animation and FX. So our audience really is, government, media, industry, educators and students, and ecosystem partners. And we're industry agnostic, so it's about the applications of those technologies. And then to drill down a little further, so today we're going to be talking about, extended reality, and it's also about how the other interactive digital technologies are utilized and drill down into a few subsectors. So you'll see some of the buckets that we're going to focus on in terms of programming that encompass those technologies like gaming, product and services, and media. And that includes interactive digital agencies as well. So to give you a sort of flavor example of some of our members, you'll see, larger gaming studios, smaller gaming studios, AR, VR companies like we're seeing on our panel today, as well as larger technology companies and really our economic development partners that are aligned and catalyzing the ecosystem, as well as post-secondary institutions that are really there to produce that next generation of talent for the sector. So that brings us to, why opt in? What are the benefits of, being a part of this community? It's really about the collisions and the pathways for engagement. It's about, understanding that, there's opportunities to learn from your peers, to gather intel, and really be that clear voice in terms of our advocacy efforts. So we meet a number of times a year with our partners at the Alberta government to talk about, what is the foundation that's required to support the growth of the sector, and more importantly, so that our members can thrive. And so, those are conversations around tax credits, but that's also, talent development and immigration as well. And then, of course, talking about talent is that, what are the things that we need to be doing to develop that next generation so that companies can grow and thrive in the province. So we've been busy building. We are committed to creating meaningful member experiences, and you're going to see a lot more from Digital Alberta in the coming months with new ways to connect into the community, and I'll share a few of those. So we have, we want to meet you in real life. We have an in-person meeting coming up in Calgary on September 14th with our good friends Unity, who are hosting us, who are also a member, and as well as in Edmonton on September 28th with our partners Innovate Edmonton. So come and we'll get together and be 3D. And we also, though, have some additional virtual webinar series like the conversation that we're having today. The next one's going to be about focusing on gaming and putting a spotlight on gaming and talking about that. And then following that will be interactive digital technology and marketing. And finally, a couple of additional local industry events if you want to get connected in with the tech ecosystem. The Canadian Blockchain Consortium is hosting their conference in October. There's a great conference coming up, IoT North, which takes place in Calgary in November. We've got a boutique gaming conference that attracts C-suite executives across North America that's happening in Banff in December, and of course, Inventures in the new year. And also our signature event. So this is a really great opportunity as we're reimagining the Ember Awards to be reflective of, the growing IDT sector in Alberta. And we want to hear from you if you have ideas around, the types of categories that we should be considering for the work you're engaged in. We'd love to chat. And then that leads to the ways to connect with us. So, feel free to ask questions after the panel, but we also do one-on-ones. So we have office hours every second Friday with our members and non-members. And we'd also love to get your feedback on future programming. So Paisley is going to be dropping our ecosystem survey in the chat. if you can find a couple of minutes, please fill that out. We'd love your feedback as we, move forward and evolve our programming for the new year. And we're just excited you're here and looking to engage with you in the future. So thanks for attending, and I'm going to hand it back to Paisley.
Thanks so much, Alicia. Thanks for the awesome overview of Digital Alberta. We are super excited that we are able to scale and have some full-time resources after having a volunteer board for the last 15 years. So it's really exciting that we get to expand our reach. So without further ado, I'd love to connect you with all of our panelists. So we have some of Alberta's leaders in the interactive digital media space working primarily in AR, VR. So first up is Nick Casey from Unity. He is the lead industry solutions, and he's going to give us a short little presentation on Unity and what they're up to there.
Awesome. Paisley, are we introducing the rest of the panel right now, or do I just jump into my little chat?
You can jump in and then we'll introduce everyone.
Awesome. Really excited to be here. I'm actually going to use a little presentation to help really just keep me on time. So as Paisley noted, I lead industry solutions out of the Calgary office here. My global focus is actually on human machine interface, which ties in nicely to beyond entertainment. So first, we always try to start with Unity's core values in mind. And this is really our guiding light as a company, and that's empowering creators. I think humans are still at the forefront of all these technology adoptions. And if you make it usable for the range of creativity that we have, the world will become a better place. And that is especially true in traditional industries. So very quickly, a few brag points about Unity. I'm sure most people are pretty familiar with us. We have a pretty serious reach around the company, around the world, and a role that we play in this AR, VR space. And then adoption across our target marketplace. Almost half of the top 1,000 mobile games, literally over half of the new games, and a majority of the AR, VR content. And I think that's just a nice stem from the core focus is enabling adoption in these new spaces where people are pushing the envelope. And a lot of that comes from making sure we support the new devices as they come out, trying to stay on top of that game. And that just enables us to do things in industry as well. So we're called Accelerate Solutions, and that's at our core values. We want to help our partners and our clients adopt something new in their industry, do it in a quick manner, and then it becomes theirs and they run with it. And so we're a very full team in terms of capabilities, and we work with some of the leading companies in the world. The list I have here, just over my left shoulder here is the Suncor Towers. We work with their innovation team extensively since we've moved to Calgary in 2019. Syncrude, we've done some really cool work in shovels, bringing information to shovel operators. And then some of the more expected ones, EA, Microsoft, Activision. And then the one I've been recently heavily invested in is Mercedes-Benz. Got an announcement that I can share at the end of the video. It's already been shared at GTC with both Mercedes-Benz. So obviously to do this, we're a fairly large global team, over 600 people as part of Accelerate Solutions. And these are kind of our main delivery centers. And our teams range from 1 to 50 on these types of projects. In the Suncor Innovation Lab, we often partner with Microsoft and other local companies such as J5 Design on jumping in and solving ideas that might not necessarily seem like they're a good solution for a video game technology. But at its core, it comes back to, is it usable? Is the data accessible? And does it let the humans make better decisions? That's kind of what I find a lot of the themes around it are. So what we always walk through is I'm always very scared when someone says, I want to do an AI project. To me, that's a very hard place to start a successful project. Instead, I prefer, my own background is more on the business side. So if we can define the business challenge and the problem that we're trying to solve, we bring in the technology expertise to help solve it. Our Accelerate Solutions team isn't limited to mobile AR, VR, the more typical stuff that Unity is known for. It's pretty heavy on the big data, robotics, and synthetic data side as well. I don't want to take too much time, so I do want to show some cool examples of what this actually means. Our ACO team does a lot in right-time digital twin and what we call intelligent assets. oftentimes we adopt the language of our client to make sure, because digital transformation and digital twin is most of these large companies have already adopted and have programs running in it. So we start to try and use the language they're using internally just to avoid some confusion. And these digital twins kind of seem to be based in three main categories. That's digital representation, right time data, or automation training simulation. Across one of those three, that we then pull teams together of experts that start trying to get their data in there and really help them use their data in a more powerful way is often one of the low-hanging fruits. Another really obvious one is in the automotive world, where I've spent most of my time, is the car configurators, car dashboards, and vehicle design. For example, Volkswagen's European vehicle configurator is served by an image on demand using Unity. I think the stat I was able to grab with some confidence yesterday was for Volkswagen, that's in Europe alone, that's more than 25 images served every single day, rendered on Unity via AWS to people's websites. It's pretty cool. It's pretty high volume. It's a global automaker, and it reduced their iteration time and their ability to tailor the builds to the markets that those builds serve, from about a 2-week process to same-day turnaround, assuming once again, they have their data organized. But the neater part is that once you actually have a good data ingestion pipeline from engineering data, you start to use the same master model across more use cases. And for things like marketing videos, the latest series of ID4 ads were all created in Unity, and those were actually shown on TV and, of course, different streaming services that we watch our ads on these days. I'm not gonna let this play for too long because it's radical new. I'll just talk over to it. This was the CTO of Mercedes-Benz announcing that as of 2024, the car dashboards in Mercedes-Benz will be running Unity, and they've got some very ambitious goals for it. But one of the neat things is the evolution of what drivers expect, what clients in cars expect from their car dashboards, and what that user experience to be like isn't that different to the revolution that we saw in mobile, where they expect it to look good, they expect it to view more content to it, they expect it to be 3D, to respond to show what the sensors are doing in real time, not all pre-canned animations. And they're going to do this with not specific to Mercedes-Benz, but across the automotive world with the most current chipset. So often on slightly compromised chipsets being asked to do more than just show what's on the screens. Often the autonomous driving and other features brought in there. So as of 2024, the next range of Mercedes A and C class will be powered in Unity, which was just a really, really cool project to be part of. And then just the range of who's adopting these video game technologies outside of some of the traditional entertainment space, and then into the full range of companies around the world. If you really look at just a quick little example, Cirque du Soleil is always one of my favorite ones. They actually build their sets first digitally and then use that to ensure alignment with their construction teams around the world and their performers. Just a really, really cool use case to kind of push the bar across the value of augmented reality. That's all I had. I'm going to leave time for other speakers, and hopefully I didn't go too far over.
That was amazing. Thank you so much, Nick. You're so lucky to have Unity in Calgary from an ecosystem perspective. And if everyone on the call, if you didn't know, Unity actually acquired Finger Food Studios, which was in Calgary previously. So super lucky to have kind of this global player in our market. And so next, I'd like to turn it over to Rosalinda from Red Iron Labs. Rosalinda is the CEO, and she's going to talk a little bit about, the co-founder and CEO, and she was going to talk a little bit more about what her company does and how they use AR/VR with their clients.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm like super nervous. I don't know if you can see it, but I'm shaking. I had no idea it was gonna be as hard to present on Zoom as it is in real life. Added to that, I did not take the opportunity to maybe put together branded slides that promoted what we do. So all you're gonna get is me. Sorry, that's what you're going to be looking at. So I'll try to hit some business points, and I'll also try to focus on the real how I see things. Okay, so Red R Labs, what we create are games, content, and platforms. But we do predominantly focus on VR, but do other work within other immersive mediums like AR and XR. So basically our specialization since our roots are in the game, 11:52, so I'll try not to go over 5 minutes. Being that we came from the gaming industry, a lot of our specialization does focus on massive multiplayer experiences, but in VR, and also I guess leveraging game theory into our solutions, particularly with clients. We try not to get too into the game theory, like we apply it, but then we scale it back to be a little bit more user friendly, because not everybody is a gamer or comes from that environment. So we do provide this as a service, but we also create our own products. Some of our products we've been trying to promote more heavily, like Muffin Fight. That's our latest game. And we also have some upcoming products within the metaverse area that we've been working on for a few years already, called Cultivate. So as I mentioned, yes, thanks, Mike. Thanks for the shout out. Everyone does need to try Muffin Fight. It's super fun. Okay. So we've been around since 2016, and like we started as a game studio. I always tell people the story, but I don't want to go there because I have other stuff to cover and I only have 5 minutes. Okay, so we started as a game studio in 2016, and we started by creating a game in horror. It was called Abduction. Some of y'all might remember that and be like, where's Abduction, Lloyd? Where's Abduction? It's a company inside joke. But that's how we started in VR and in horror gaming. And I won't get into the deconstruction of where that ended up, but I suffice it to say that as we've grown, we've started to find our path and develop, Lloyd and ourselves, our own spaces. So we converge out and then come back in, because we have, regardless, a very goal of creating really inspiring and just exciting products. So where he focuses on technology, I focus more on culture type things. So I wanted to start by sharing my privilege, and I'm going to be super honest. In addition to the shaking, this part I was practicing before, and I was breaking up my voice because it's sometimes hard to say. So if my voice breaks up, yeah, it's a little bit emotional. But I just wanted to start by addressing my privilege, so that it frames my perspective. This is going somewhere, I promise. So I am a brown woman in tech, and I'm gonna try to stay focused, but that statement is not only declares a privilege, but it also declares a burden. If you know, you know. But I am a brown woman in tech. My family immigrated here in the 1980s because of a civil war going on in El Salvador. So I actually grew up here in Calgary. It's the only home I've ever known. So yeah, I'm pretty proud and excited to be part of Calgary and part of Alberta. And to me, kind of going back to it, to me, that crew of Central Americans, I'm thinking Salvadorans, but there was other Central Americans that grew up in that era. So we would have been teenagers around the mid 90s. So that group, so us kids coming into Calgary growing up, I think is a very special group of individuals. And I'm really proud to be part of that crew. And when I often say that my mom's oppressions faced by my mom became my privileges, I think that is for the most part true. But there was, growing up in the 90s, there was a really fucked up period. I don't know if it's still, I haven't been in high school for a very long time, but there was a really fucked up system level racism that we faced as Central Americans, which caused a lot of people to drop out and all of this stuff. So all I'm trying to get at is, it is a privilege for me, Salvadoran, to be here, not just here literally talking to you, but here as a CEO in Calgary of a tech company. So I think that's pretty fucking cool. But it's through my experience. This is where I'm getting to the point. I'm Latino, so I tell stories to get to a point. So this is the point. The point is that it is through my experiences that my perspectives have been developed, and why these things are so important to Red Iron Labs. And so that's not only just why I champion things like inclusive design, but why I focus on challenging and exploring themes of like identity and human experience in tech and the process of that. And also trying to work hard to ensure that this is integrated in our company, not just in our culture, but also in the products that we start kind of producing. So my answer to what is the big problem we're trying to solve at Red Iron Labs, it is that, which I just described. But if you ask more businessy folks in my team who might have taken advantage of this moment to pitch us, I would say that the three problems that we're trying to solve is increasing adoption of virtual reality, supporting digital transformation, and empowering hands-on learners. And I'm done.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rosalinda. That was it's such a unique view, and we really appreciate you bringing that background into this conversation. So thank you so much. And I think the really cool part here is that we're hearing from Unity, which is kind of like a systems level solution. We have Rosalinda at Red Iron, and she's focused more on adopting these technologies for clients and helping them reimagine different journeys. And now we're moving on to Guillermo from ICwhatUC, and he is kind of an end user of some of these technologies and has created a really amazing tech company in Calgary. So I will turn it over to you, Guillermo.
Sure, thanks, Paisley. Appreciate it. Rosalinda, great. Thank you for sharing all those things, and Nick as well. Rosalinda, as a fellow Latin in that era, I can feel a little bit what you're talking about. So thanks for sharing and bringing it up for everybody. ICwhatUC, we are, we're a virtual service platform, virtual customer experience platform, for enterprise customers. We simplify that customer experience that we all kind of endure in many cases with smart video. So we use it with smart video because we use the augmented reality elements of it really lightly, because we're trying to target the mass market. And so if you think of augmented reality in terms of the spectrum of, being able to connect with somebody and see through their camera and be able to, help them and guide them and coach them. And the other end being, a fully immersive experience. We're on the far end of it because we want to try and appeal to some of the problems that people are suffering through as they're using their consumer experiences. So, I'll just do one slide here to kind of as a backdrop for my point. Where we got here? Share. Is that working? Ooh. Hang on here. Those are my kids. So we really think of the future of customer experience as being virtual first. And the idea behind that is that, when we're going to try and connect with our people, with our customers, we want to make sure that it's frictionless and easy. And we want to be, make it easy, make it effective, and make it, empathetic and emotional. And these things are really absent in the customer experience today. So I'll pause for a second and give you a backdrop on how the whole company started. So a couple of years back, I was kind of packed up and ready for vacation with my family, and everyone was ready to go in the car and ready to rock. And my garage door wouldn't open up. And you can imagine the bit of stress I was going through as we're all kind of, ready to go on a longer drive, and I'm stuck. And so I called the 1-800 number that was available on the garage door opener to try and see if I could get some help. It was certainly before service hours in Calgary. And, after about 45 minutes of being on hold and going through the whole process and the IVR, finally talking to somebody, and they couldn't help me. Finally, a couple hours later, a service technician comes out. They kind of realized that a hockey stick had slipped and was jamming the door and closed. And, it dawned on me during the drive that, this is a real fundamental problem. And with all the technology we have in our hands around augmented reality, gaming, and so on and so forth, why aren't these merging into our customer experience? And so we took a look at that and decided, started launching a product around solving these fundamental kind of, I'll say peak friction points in the customer experience around choosing the product you want to buy, implementing it or setting it up or installing it, and then finally the customer support and customer care side of things. These key inflection points of the customer journey are really, really full of friction. And when you do need help, that expertise simply isn't available kind of on demand, or at least minimum on your schedule. And so we help that expertise become something that is very, very easy to consume for an end user in any way, shape, or form. And so we kind of look at the world in terms of AR being something that's served up on the 3.5, 3.6 million devices that are in the world today that are, smartphones that are AR enabled. And we try and really bring that mass market solution-based approach to using AR. So for our world, in this case, we've got Bear Paints. Bear Paints does virtual color consultations, and they help people talk through different ways of choosing a paint for their particular rooms, their scenarios. And then we match it all together with AI and NLP to create a really comprehensive experience and also make it easier for the technician. And so, from that, our view of the world is there's, two sides of the spectrum. You've obviously got the Unity dev stack side of things. You've got, what Rosalinda's building in terms of gaming side of things. We're taking these kind of concepts and applying them into our customer experience and trying to reshape that and bring AR to the mass market in ways that they haven't really considered before. Why the world is asking for this kind of solution right now is we're really getting to a world right now where we're kind of stuck in the middle between consuming 100% digitally a lot of our products and services and kind of how we used to do it before. And companies haven't really transitioned fully into being able to, I'll say at the mass market level, to be able to provide these kind of like services. And on our side, and then the customer side, we want to demand things on time, on our schedule, whenever we want it. So that mismatch is really creating a bit of a stalemate with customers, and we solve that problem. So we're excited to share a number of our customers are really kind of non-traditional customers, like Enbridge, like Brookfield, like ATCO, getting into Bear, Delta, the non-traditional customers that are serving up, augmented experiences to their customers on demand through the browser. So really trying to make it simple and universal for everybody. That's what ICwhatUC does. We're excited about our growth curve so far. We've been, in the market with other customers, in market with companies and products for 2.5 years now, and it's been a very exciting journey, certainly to bring this kind of transformation to that kind of consumer products and customer experience space.
Thanks so much, Guillermo. It's so exciting to hear kind of an end use case of how AR is being used to solve big problems. And notice some big players on your icons decks of Bear and ATCO. Like these are not small companies, and they're using a Calgary-based technology. That's pretty cool.
Pretty exciting. Thanks, Paisley.
So next we will move on to, last but not least, Mike McCready from Lethbridge College. And so Mike is working in the Spatial Technologies Applied Research and Training Center. So START is the acronym there, and they are doing some really cool things across industry. So I will turn that over to Mike.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Paisley. I think this is a great representation of different applications of the technology. We've got Unity, who is a enabler providing the solutions to create. We've got Red Iron Labs and ICwhatUC, who are end users of immersive technology, and then Lethbridge College, who are working towards a couple of things. One, creating the next generation of developers for this new world we're coming into, but also helping expand and explore with other industries the potential of immersive tech. And I just got a really quick slide deck that I'll share quickly to talk about START. Oops, that is not the first slide. Sorry, one sec. There wouldn't be a tech presentation without tech problems, right? There you go. All right. So the START Center is kind of, I won't go into the history. If anyone ever wants to talk about how we came to be, I'd love to chat, but we don't have time enough, 5 minutes. But really what START is, it's really about helping to organizations to identify the potential that this technology will have within their own workflow, whether they're a tech company or not. So through various forms of technical services and consulting, providing training and education. We are in the process of exploring micro-credentialing. We've had some conversations with some of the Unity Learn folks, as well as looking at how can we provide some on-demand technology training for companies, as well as looking at developing prototypes for organizations to help envision the potential of their idea in reality there. one of the things that is great about is how we work. The START Center works really closely with this triad of working with industry. We work really closely with Red Iron Labs, and I'll talk a little bit about that, but also with community. And I think the most important piece is bringing in students and grads. We have at Lethbridge College a VR AR program, the only one of its kind in Alberta, and one of the first in Canada that is a credentialed program that teaches students how to create a variety of content across the spectrum for immersive technologies. So not only are we able to provide training and new opportunities for the future developers, but we get a really unique lens on projects. So this is how we work as we work on projects here. Over the course of a couple of years since we've been around, we've really identified a few industry pillars and some research themes. Obviously, agriculture and trades makes sense because that's what we teach at the college, but also first response, architecture, healthcare, and tourism and heritage. And through these different themes or pillars, so we've got some research themes looking at how do we improve spatial data collection for XR. That's everything from motion capture to laser scanning, photogrammetry, et cetera. Looking at how do we develop authentic virtual experiences? And that's the key thing is how do we, whether it's training or tourism, how do we create experiences that are authentic for the user? And then how do we deploy these XR solutions, whether that's a multiplayer or some of the harder considerations that we need to keep in mind there. So here's an example of one project that we worked on. I know I'll just kind of talk over it. We worked on this with the MD of Greenview. And so we use technology such as laser scanning. So you see those cliffs in the video. If I just go back and pause, let's see if I can, there we go. You kind of can see them. It's Canada's only open scale dinosaur track. There are literally thousands of dinosaur tracks in the side of this cliff. But as you can see, the sheer steepness of it makes it impossible for the MD of Greenview to take people there for safety and logistics. So we scanned the cliffs and created a virtual reality experience that allows participants who come to the visitor center to put on a headset and become a paleontologist for a day. They learn about the environment, they learn about the history, they learn about the steps to cast the dinosaur print. And so it's a great opportunity to expose and share this natural resource without bringing people there. We are working on a variety of other projects with regards to trade, agriculture, more heritage, and you'll see more information about these as time goes on. We're really excited about this last one, working on a driving simulator in virtual reality with some technology partners, as well as the Lethbridge Police Service. There'll be some more news about that in the near future here. Just really quickly here, I'm almost out of time. Over the last couple of years, we've seen a tremendous amount of success within the START Center. Over $2.5 million have been raised through grants, industry partnerships, and fee-for-service contracts with our partners. And that's not ending. Because of some of these grants that we were able to get, we are actively recruiting and researching hiring a machine learning researcher, primarily in the area of virtual beings, a senior Unity developer, as well as an XR developer intern that we'll be looking at adding to our team. So the field is ready to harvest, and we're really excited about working with industry to help them realize the potential that this technology will have within their own workflow. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Exciting to see, real use case of you hiring and the sector growing in real time. So thank you for that overview. Next, we're going to jump into questions. So I have a couple questions for the panelists, but feel free to just throw anything into the chat, and then we'll also open it up for verbal questions in about 20 minutes. So Nick, maybe we'll start with you. So you mentioned some of the benefits that Volkswagen saw in using Unity, but can you tell us maybe some of the barriers that some of your clients see initially when they're exploring integrating these types of technology?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak a little bit more to the Volkswagen example. They've talked about it at some conferences. The project actually started in 2020, and the POC and everything was successful, and the MVP was good. And then when they tried to scale it across their model range, they pretty quickly found that their own internal data standards, logically, they weren't made for this purpose. And so they didn't work in an automated way that way. And getting their data aligned was far more work than they initially expected it to be. And that remains true across different sectors. we do quite a bit of work with Bell Flight. They make big helicopters, and the same story there. Getting their data ready for a series of simulation use is a very big process that is separate from next gen digital transformation adoption. It's and often it's from so many different vendors and engineering silos along the way. Just nomenclature, organization, metadata isn't structured in a way that's easy to use. That's one of the biggest barriers I see. The other side is on the human side. Sometimes this digital transformation, almost all the time, this digital transformation does change how people's jobs will be done. And typically the goal of it is to help them be better at the job, help them do their job with more information at hand, easily accessible. And for one of our large mining clients that we were doing some shovel projects with, we actually found an unexpected outcome. So if you go at the range of shovel operators, the really, really good operators, they actually weren't our target class. We wanted to standardize the production of a shovel in a mine site. And interestingly enough, more of the really, really good operators adopted the tool and used it, actually making them better. And some of the less performant operators were the ones that weren't using the system when it was brought to them as well. So kind of an unexpected goal by adoption. So the change management side of it is something that's easy to overlook and often harder than expected. So I'd say like that's the state of the technology is pretty good. Getting data and people ready has been a constant and consistent challenges across these projects.
Thanks, that's awesome. Like, it's not something I think that most people would think of as the data being the biggest challenge. I was definitely thinking something more along the lines of the technology. So it's interesting that it's more on the client side at the beginning. Guillermo, do you have any other color about how your clients find difficulties incorporating kind of an end user technology?
You bet. I think, to Nick's point, like it changes so much, like what you can do. For example, just being able to see, obviously you're able to convey information better, you're able to appreciate the situation better. You're now moving into a coaching conversation instead of an interrogation type conversation with an end customer. And that whole process changes the skills that are required, right? Because you're not handling customers anymore, you're actually solving for them. And that kind of like starts to really change the kind of person you want to hire. And so the next point around people, because you're able to do so much more, you kind of have this bit of a people thing that you need to address, when in fact you're actually making less people more productive, but now you need different people because you want to solve those problems. And so ushering the existing, the incumbent resources through that transition into what their new job looks like is really a bit of a challenge. The next one is around process, because now you're able to do so much more, and you can engage so many more different ways. You now have to introduce different ways of different ways and touch points to engage your customers. So here's an example. One of our customers, Moen Faucets, now they're introducing a virtual service SKU that you can check out with. So you go buy a faucet from Moen online, and at checkout, you're able to purchase 35 minutes of virtual technical advice, right? That's kind of a different process. Like, we have to get a SKU created, we have to get that put into the POS, we have to get that processed through. There's got to be pricing around it and all those things. That's just kind of like a bit of a that's a departure from what we're accustomed to. And all of this kind of like cycles of actually immersing virtual and digital I'll say, into our processes. There's a lot of it's not there yet. And so I would say people and process, the two big things that we have to kind of work strongly with our customers to help them embrace the technology. And so that's why a lot of our product builds out a ton of data around how the engagements are happening, so we can create coaching moments and learning moments for our end users. And then ultimately, some things that we've learned on is that we've got to try and figure out how to make the end user's job a whole lot better and a lot easier. And so we use AI and NLP to create workflows right from the sessions. Because now that you can see and you can engage visually, now you can kind of build in a whole much more depth into the conversation that never existed before. And that's a big part of the layers of change that we're bringing to the conversation for that customer experience.
Awesome, thank you. And Rosalinda, do you have anything to add? I know culture is a big a big thing for you over at Red Iron. So what kind of, like, I think both Guillermo and Nick kind of mentioned more on the people side and the process side. So how do you find that you create that culture with your clients to allow for these technologies to be implemented?
Okay, well, I have an answer to barriers to adoption, which I think is relevant, but just hear me out because I hear what Guillermo and Nick were talking about, and for sure they touched on the people side. I guess like my short answer is that a barrier I perceive is prioritizing a needs approach to solving that problem versus or like prioritizing that or marginalizing the importance of focusing on the strength-based approach. So, and I'm just going to start with like a really good example, I think, that I would hear in Alberta years ago. Like, I think things have changed a little bit, but back 2016, 17, 18, there was a lot of discourse around like, we don't have enough trained people and all of that. Like, and what are the solutions we're going to focus on to solve this problem? And it's very needs-based because it's like, we need more people. They need to have this qualifications. They need to understand all of this. Whereas I think that the approach that I feel we do at Red Iron Labs, and I'm kind of ignoring the client side that you're requesting, but just know that like from my perspective, like a needs approach that we're, a strengths-based approach that we're trying with Red Iron Labs, kind of tying back into the skill set, but more importantly, developing differently created products is we're kind of like taking an approach of like a grassroots based approach of design. So we're actually working with different artists who identify as women, as brown, as Black within the Calgary space to help us to kind of develop an inclusive design towards our metaverse product, which is Cultivate. So we're really working with artists, and these aren't like technically trained artists. These are differently trained artists. Because there's a lot of artists in the space who are technical enough to join a studio, but we're talking about different artists. And we've also partnered with another artist. Their name is Mel V. And we're trying to kind of roll out her social innovation scientist approach. And the whole purpose of it is to merge technology and artistry to come up with like a socially engaged product. So I guess like to answer your question in my way, one of the barriers is always focusing on needs, like what we need to do, and instead think bigger, different, humanly, and just focus on like the strengths that different communities and different peoples have to, come together and just create something differently.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that perspective. Mike, do you have anything to add? What do you see as the barriers?
Well, I'll take it from a little bit of a different approach. I'll take it from the talent barrier. And one of the things that and I don't know if the other companies have no experience, but the difficulty in finding talent. And I think that stems back down to even in high school now, and being able to communicate that, that this isn't just about, from the parents' perspective, this isn't just about gaming. This isn't just about, for fun. There is a business that can be had. There is an economy in this, and communicating that this is a potential career option for high school students is something that we struggle with. We've got some plans that we're working on how to do that outreach. So I think that could stem to C-suite level people, as well as a misunderstanding of the potential of the technology, that it's not Google Cardboard, or it's not for games. Or there's a lot to this that can improve workflows, save lives, reduce risk. So I think that barrier for adoption, both from a talent career path approach or a adoption within a company, is a misunderstanding of what the technology is and what it can do. And so we're working with some ideas to how to address that, at least at the high school level. So I think all of us who, are enthusiasts or work in this field have a responsibility at our respective workplaces or our circle of influence to educate that this technology is not a fad, it's not for games, it's not a waste of time.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think at Digital Alberta, we've also recognized that getting exposure to these technologies younger and younger is only going to help the entire ecosystem. So we're excited to hear what kind of programming you guys are coming out with for that at Lethbridge College. Sasha has a question. So he says, for all panelists, how do you go about prototyping immersive experiences with clients? What does that journey look like from idea to an immersive application? And Nick's kind of already taken a little stab in the chat, which is great. I think this is an awesome question because I think most of us kind of know what the prototyping steps are for apps or prototyping an idea, but how does that differ when you're looking at more of an immersive solution? I'll leave that open to anyone. Thanks, Sasha. Bye, Guillermo, Rosalinda.
Can you just repeat the question? Because
Yeah, sure. So it was, how do you go about prototyping immersive experiences with clients? What does the journey look like from idea to immersive application? Nick, I saw your mute come off.
Yeah, so I just saw, so I replied, I'll just read it for people in case people don't have the chat open. So at Solutions, we try to dive in with the client. Often with immersive experiences, we find that showing like demos of what we think they're asking for or what we think the solution could be, and combining that with visual concept art is where we try to get alignment. Because 3D space and how we perceive the world is so like individual, it's being ready to iterate on that as well. Like sometimes when you tell someone like, hey, this experience over in advanced manufacturing is a lot like what you're asking for your sawmill, and they can't see it because all they see is that's advanced manufacturing, not sawmill. So then you combine that with some concept art that shows the same kind of demo you made elsewhere in their context, and then iterate on it afterwards. There's often the demos are also often helpful for showing the current state of some of the hardware. For some of the AR headsets, view range is something people don't design for always. And so designing for the distance from the object you're looking at so that the view range isn't a noticeable part, playing with the view box so that you're not actually showing harsh lines, not bringing a color right down to the corner of the line. You have different merging that goes on that, your own eyes play the trick on you unless you tell them otherwise. And follow up, Sasha, you kind of asked, is that as an inspiration or iteration on the code side of things? We always try to take learnings from the source code style of things. And that's usually as far as that goes. It's typically more project inspiration. That's with the caveat of like, there are some packages that you're going to want to reuse, lobbying for multiplayer and some of the same sending data packets back and forth. So you don't want to recreate the wheel every single time when there are proven hardened solutions out there. But then the side that is the client side application, their assets, you often do that at a totally custom scale. We do.
That's cool. Yeah. Also, I guess so. A lot of that iteration more takes place on the sketching side of things and those kind of concepts, I guess, or using Figma. I guess that's what I'm trying to figure out is, when I'm making a VR app, like, okay, I'm sketching out ideas and then suddenly I'm jumping into the Unity project. Like, but how do you prototype in between those kind of stages?
So not gonna lie, sometimes that depends on the client. Do they want to see it iterate on the headset or on device, or even on just a screen, within the Unity editor, just sharing it there. But we try to get it as far towards alignment as we can in concept art and wireframes. So that once again, that's just because the iteration there can be so fast, and it's not redoing everything. It's very small individual scenes trying to get right. And then the other side that I kind of started to hint on there is once you do something in the application, ideally you're using something, with them in mind and their tracking, with the plan of bettering the app as the pure purpose of it. Where are they spending their gaze looking if you have eye tracking? What are they clicking on? Where are they expecting to be able to do something they can't do something? Collecting that app information as early as possible with the very explicit and singular goal of bettering the application.
Very
So
cool.
thank
Yeah, very cool. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks so much for your question, Sasha. That was a great conversation. Our next question is, I think we've talked about the metaverse a few times now. I've heard a few mentions of it. So let's just dive into a metaverse question. What do you see happening in the metaverse? Do you think it's a fad? Do you think it's here to stay? Maybe Rosalinda, do you want to chat about that? I know you've mentioned your metaverse product a few times.
Yeah, I totally do. But I also want to hear what Guillermo had to say about the previous question, because I saw that he wanted to add in, and I just want to know because I'm intrigued.
I mean, ours is much simpler. Thanks a lot, Rosalinda. Ours is much simpler in that, like, we really we take the same journey that Nick was talking about. We try and script it into its very, very simple form, and we do a tons of role playing. So our end, like, there's a bit of apprehension initially from the end, I'll say, expert, because they're just not familiar with this kind of communication. And so we script it pretty heavily in terms of how they're going to solve the task, and we mock and roll up. And so with that immersive experience from the end, I'll say the end expert and then the end user is really pretty scripted. And like, again, we keep the use case very narrow and defined and defined and prescribed, it's clear what they have to do. And getting some repetitions in that engagement really, really drives uptake in terms of getting into, kind of more broader, more complex scenarios, to the point that we had one expert who was really, really familiar with the technology, probably did 500, 600 virtual sessions, was very comfortable coaching somebody how to change the fan belt on their furnace. Like, that's kind of crazy to kind of go from, hey, is there batteries in your thermostat, to checking your furnace to teaching them how to replace a fan belt. And so just really getting them comfortable around keeping it simple and keeping it small. That's how we do it.
Anyone else would like to answer? Thank you so much for the answer, Guillermo, and for calling that out, Rosalinda. Mike, or do you want to add anything else to that question before we jump on?
No, I'm good. Let's talk about the metaverse.
Yeah, you're ready? That's everyone's favorite conversation.
Yeah, you'll have to repeat the question.
No worries. So Rosalinda, you've mentioned your product a few times. So I'd love to start a conversation about the metaverse, what kind of the current trends are, what you see as the new exciting thing in the metaverse, and if you think it's here to stay or if it's just a fad.
Okay, cool. So I guess I just, where I'll start with that is just kind of like that future versus fad thing. Like, I'm sure, like, what I'm going to say is nothing like mind-blowing, but it's just, it's so hard to answer in that way, because, like, I think that technology grows up and out. So there's always a future. So it always grows this way out. So, like, to call it a fad or to expect it to end is just kind of I think unrealistic, because I think that the metaverse that we know today is just like the tiniest little roots of what it's going to be. So I have my notes here and I call people Poindexters. So I'll try to avoid that term. But people like trying to be all like, it's just the wrong person is leading it and all of this stuff. And like, it does add to the discourse of the time, because in the future, I do study culture. So in the future, we're going to look back and be all like, analyzing those perspectives from the cultural perspective, right? Because it's a moment in time. But I think that the real leaders that are going to be building the metaverse are like 13, maybe 5, you know what I mean? Like, because they're going to bring in their own like paradigm and way of doing things and understanding the world that is going to be completely different than anything that we see now. So I guess when it comes to my opinion about fad and future, it's just like it's a growing thing. It's technology just grows. But in terms of what we've been doing with Cultivate and the metaverse, I think there's a question that I go into this later. I don't remember my questions, but I wanted to talk about how when we took the approach of creating Cultivate from a like a standard design process, we cycled because we created the technology that would create like this mass of open space, but the user experience wasn't good enough. So we've been trying to build it for about 3 years. We've gotten funding from CMF, the Canadian Media Fund, to build it. So it's not insignificant. Yet the user experience hasn't quite developed yet. And I guess the reason is that it was being developed from people who have expectations of what gameplay is, what the interaction should look like, as opposed to developing a solution for people who just want to explore and have fun. So I kind of alluded to it before, like the approach that we're taking with the artists. They're helping us to kind of define what that user experience will be, so that we create something that's just a different approach to creating. So I don't remember where I was going with that. Mike, I want to hear your insights because you're so into the metaverse.
Thank you, Rosalind.
Well, you hit on something I think is really important, and that is user experience, right? User experience within metaverse platforms or products is more important than it has been in the past, because if you take a look at, a lot of people have made the comparison of the metaverse with the internet. If you've read articles, you've seen those comparisons, and the internet has become ubiquitous, right? The internet, you don't think about the internet, you just go, right? You just go and it's there, and the experience, if it's terrible, it's the website, but the fact that you can connect to it no matter what, that experience is important. And because people, were predicted to spend, I saw an article, I don't know if it was from Forbes or Fortune, about working in the metaverse and how that evolution is coming. If we're going to be spending time in the metaverse, and I don't believe it'll be called the metaverse when it does kind of hit mainstream, but if we're going to be spending time there, that user experience that you were talking about, Rosalinda, is super important. So I'm happy to hear you guys are spending the time on making that, because there's a lot of, if we've tried different social XR platforms like Engage or Altspace or Rec Room, they all have their pluses and their downsides, and I don't think there is a platform out there that answers everything, right? I think that and I don't think there will be one platform that serves the metaverse. People think that it's going to be, Zuckerberg's Meta or Horizons. I don't think it's going to be one platform. It won't be a destination. It'll be a journey. And I don't think it is a fad. And the reason I think that we put that in as a question was because in the early 90s, people were calling out that the internet was a fad, right? So I think that that's why people are wondering about that with the metaverse. It's going to evolve and revolutionize how we kind of communicate and do business. And I think for the people who are on the call today, the sooner you start researching and learning and preparing, with real-time 3D, that's one of Unity's backbone messages is real-time 3D. The sooner we start becoming familiar as companies with that technology, the better you will be prepared when this does become, mainstream. And so I do feel like it's an important thing for us to consider as companies and as developers. And I agree with a few of the comments about them being early. They'll be young, right? The developers of the metaverse in the future will not be me. They will be young. And that's why it's even so important, as I go back to that one concept, about reaching out to high schools and even beyond, looking at incorporating. I know, and they do somewhat a good job with STEM, I guess, if you add the arts, STEAM technologies into the classroom, but it's really archaic in the sense that it doesn't have anything to do with immersive, right? It's still doing coding, but it doesn't talk about, because coding for apps and websites is completely different when you think about the experiences for what the metaverse will be. So I think we all need to try to talk to our nieces, our grandsons, our kids, or whatever, our schools, about the importance of not just incorporating STEAM into the classroom, but actually immersive experiences and developing immersive experiences, right? You've got Scratch and these different things that you can create, little coding experiences. Let's have them get in there and create immersive experiences in grade 6 and grade 8 and that kind of thing.
Just growing on that same vein a little bit, Rosalinda and Mike kind of already hit on the fact that like it's a journey, it's going to continue evolving. one of the metaphors that I found, or examples I found helpful and how to expect what's about to change. I look at Lego. They've gone through this incredible digital transformation as a company and stayed extremely relevant. And they went through this major shift of, they saw the world of play evolve and what their value to their clients were. And their clients weren't just kids, or their parents who buy the Legos, most typically. And the kids were expecting a digital component of play. And previously, Lego only had a physical component of play. One of their great successes over the last 4 or 5 years is bringing those two worlds together. And they've used AR and remote controls and other things to great success to combine those two things, including entire Lego scenes that are built out in AR that play with the physical scene. I think we're going to see that same journey through collaboration and online connected experience, where in some ways the metaverse is already here. Companies, brands, people have digital and online presences, and that is going to continue to be leveraged and become more and more important. And one of the things that I see some of the big brands, whose a lot of their value as a company is their brand, they're going to be the early adopters, because if they don't go and establish their digital online brand, they will miss the boat on that opportunity to define what they are there.
Couldn't agree more. I heard an interesting comment the other day, and it said, maybe we won't all grab virtual coffees and sit in virtual meetings for 12 hours a day. Like, that dream of the metaverse might never materialize, but we're already living in the metaverse in certain ways, like you just said, with Lego and with different platforms being built. Like, there's definitely so many components that are going to continue to evolve. It might not just look like virtual skiing every weekend with your best friends in Aspen, which is a little bit more aspirational. Thank you so much for all of those amazing comments. The next question I have is, what do you see that's changed a lot over the last 3 years? And kind of going into the next 3 years, what do you think that looks like? What has been the most surprising leap that you've seen through technology in this space? Guillermo?
Yeah, sure, I'll jump in. So it's been really interesting to watch from our side of things, just the like, when there's a pain or a sense of urgency around solving something, the willingness for end consumers of all ages and all demographics to jump in and embrace this experience. You would probably typically cast get a white brush and say only this generation or this particular cohort of end customers would embrace it. But really, we've seen all sorts of people, all sorts of generations, all sorts of backgrounds embracing when they've got a problem to solve. And so it will be interesting to see when we get to a point that we're offering opt-in or alternative options for people to have a virtual engagement and have that, kind of like almost split A/B tested versus a physical engagement, and what people will choose. Like I can see it right now in terms of your conversation, you're mentioning how we're living in the metaverse right now, so to speak. Like, it is totally practical to meet somebody virtually first before you meet them face to face. And we kind of want to be more effective with our time that way. And so I'm finding more and more the kind of like our human priorities, that we're prioritizing consumption of those priorities and like fragmenting it into like the digital and then the analog experience. And that digital experience is so much cheaper in terms of like time and effort and money, that we're just going to end up drifting towards those virtual experiences first, because it's just a better use of our time. And then when we look for emotional connection, or maybe some more of the anthropological needs, like hugging somebody, like that's going to be kind of like maybe the third or fourth meeting or the second meeting or whatever. But we'll be building relationships and building connectivity using the metaverse or using virtual first. And then when required, when there's that desire to go to that next level, we'll engage in a physical context or an analog context. Like I said, it's overwhelming to see how many people are adopting it when they need that answer.
Yeah, for sure. Mike, do you have anything to add on that one? What have you seen that's changed as somebody who's working kind of across sectors?
Oh, I need a few more moments to think about that.
No worries.
Sorry about that.
Well, My background's in software development and app development, and I can say from my perspective, the implementation of sensors and the ability for phones to process larger and larger amounts of data has just really come so far in the last 3 years. I was at an app developer in Calgary here, and we had a client that used an app to take a picture of canola seed and process that into grading for the farmers. They didn't have to drive all the way to the grain elevator. And, you know, when we first started the project, we could only process 100 seed pictures, and we were working on a process to do 500 seed pictures. And we knew that we just had to wait for that next iPhone to come out, and we knew it would be coming in the next year for something big enough to process that amount of data. And, you know, and also the implementation of the LiDAR sensors, you're being able to build massive point cloud in real time just on your phone or your iPad. So you know, there's some definite hardware capabilities that are moving forward as well.
You know, just to speak to that. Oh, sorry. Just to speak to that, you know, that hardware adoption, I think is I think one of the things, and that hardware advancement is one of the things I think is key for the growth of whatever we're going to call the metaverse. If you think back, you know, early days of the internet, you know, you accessed it through dial-up on your computer. Fast forward 20 plus years to where we are today, and we all have the internet here, right? And that's that ubiquitous thing I was talking about earlier. And so I think as we see, and we're seeing some advancements, like I'm, you know, whether you love or hate Meta, you know, I'm super excited for Project Cambria, whatever they're going to end up calling it, and for the advances that we're going to see in that, because it's that friction of getting into the device, whether it's wearable or whether it's handheld, that I think once that is reduced, we'll see a wider adoption of using these spatial technologies.
Agreed. And maybe that's a great segue into one of our final questions is, what do companies need to do to start bringing in more of these immersive technologies to their own operations? What is the first step? Nick, you've mentioned data a few times being a barrier. How do you get that data in a good place? What is the first step? What's the question you need to ask to start something like this?
I'm happy to start. Oh, I see. Go, Mark, go for it.
Oh, I was just saying lots of data. Like, it's you know, I mean, it's kind of one thing in a designed environment. Like there's kind of like design data, you know the environment you're trying to craft, and so you have kind of like a schedule of data you need to be able to convey that. But it will be very interesting when you're looking at in a kind of like a responsive environment where you're consuming everything around you. Like, you know, if I'm looking at Nick right now and I see the windows behind him, and how do you process that in real time and connect things to that? So it will be when you're consuming the whole wide world and processing that in real time, that's going to be crazy. Because like, just like, you know, like let's say for example, just and you'll use Nick again, that backdrop behind him. Let's say for example, there was an ad that was, you know, on that wall, but only visible through AR, right? And only if I looked at it and it was anchored there and persistent. Like that's kind of crazy. Like you'll have to rent that wall, there'll be commercial to it or commercialization to it. And then, but you'll have to know that wall exists and where it exists. And that's kind of like a bit of a mind bender when you think about it, versus in a video game where, you know, there's boundaries to it and there's design to it. That's kind of like, that's a bit of the wow that I'm kind of looking for from what the world's going to look like, is just that the designed experiences versus the responsive experiences.
I think that's a super, super interesting take. And I think it's a good example of what's often very hard in projects is so much of the video game tech is for designed experiences, and so much of the industry adoption is for real world use. And the data is not as friendly. What I was going to answer the question on is it's kind of two parts of the same problem. And that's doing tech projects for the sake of tech projects can be dangerous for business value return. So if you focus on a problem, that's a great place to start. And at the same point, don't let a single piece of technology be your answer to the range of problems. And so that's where I think technological convergence, where, you know, we've already talked about big data and real-time 3D kind of coming together. At the same time, there's the problem solving that synthetic data or machine learning or different sensors all kind of bring together. And a lot of the value and the value of the solution will be in that data convergence.
So anything else to add, Rosalinda, Mike?
Rosalinda, do you have anything, or
Oh, I saw you on my muted. I can go last. I'm happy to.
Okay, I was just going to say, one of the things I think is a good recommendation for businesses to kind of get into the space is to start small, right? I think a lot of companies think that they've got to solve the world, like solve their world problems in one fell swoop, and that can be overwhelming and almost counterproductive. So look at a small challenge and develop a solution with that, and maybe even just an internal kind of offside the desk, a little mini kind of a project. An example is we're working with a energy company and creating a training prototype for one of their procedures out of the hundreds that they have access to. If they were trying to revamp their entire training protocol to be immersive, it would be overwhelming. So think about one pain point, going back to what Nick said, be deliberate in your actions, don't just do it for the sake of it. Think of one pain point and start small, and don't be afraid to fail. And we probably all heard of this saying, fail fast, fail often, or fail fast, fail forward. Don't be afraid to make mistakes and get into it and just try it out.
Love that. Thanks, Mike. I guess like the advice that it's so messy. It's so messy because there's so many areas to touch up on, like in terms of like, how do we implement like immersive technology? And from the adult point of view, because we're all adults here, like you're asking our advice and we say data, numbers, and give all of this technology like jargon and stuff. But so like we have those perspectives, right? I think that I don't know what it's going to be like to have a company like Suncor implement. It's going to be a good day for change managers, like when they start implementing such a huge change into policies and stuff. So I'm definitely going to focus more on advice to smaller companies than like large corporate whatevers. But I did want to reference the iconic Ice Cube for this, who I once heard saying that it's important to be constructive, not destructive. And that's how he led his life and created stuff instead of going out and doing stuff. But if you're an entrepreneur and you're an enthusiast wanting to get into the game, I would probably stay away from social media. Because it's just really overwhelming, and social media is a trap, and you only see the best 5 seconds of someone's life there, and they promote and they talk about it. So it gets to be really intimidating, because people are really just showing you that facade of perfection and intelligence and innovation and all of that stuff. So I guess my advice is to look at it to get inspired, but don't let it shake you, and to create, don't hate. So it's that simple.
Thanks so much. And I love the quote from Ice Cube. The very last question, unless anybody from the audience would like to throw some more questions in the chat, I have one more, and it's more from a talent perspective. So we just chatted about how companies can maybe look at implementing these types of technologies, but how do individuals, if they're looking for a career shift, if they're looking to start their career, what paths and what skills do they need to take? So maybe Mike, we'll start with you, and you can talk to some of the programs that you have and some of the soft skills as well.
Sure. So like I mentioned earlier on, at Lethbridge College, we have a 1-year certificate program that teaches everything from programming to spatial audio design to 3D modeling, a wide gamut there. But one of the things that is a challenge with that is that it's a full-time, even though it's remote, you could live anywhere in the world and take it. It's still a full-time program. We have offered a number of workshops in the past and are looking at developing some micro-credentials in the XR developer space as well. I'll also give a shout out to Unity Learn. There's a lot of great resources at Unity Learn. Unity's kind of learning platform where if you want to learn coding or virtual reality development or game design, great resources there. I've run summer camps over the last 3 or 4 years with youth, and I've led them through video game design using Unity Learn curriculum. So there's another great resource there from the technology side.
Thank you. And Nick and Guillermo and Rosalinda, what do you look for when you're hiring? What are like beyond the technical, or are there credentials? What do you look for?
Sure, go. You know, it's funny because like it's really shaped itself over the last couple of years in terms of what I prioritize or stack rank. But now a person must be like obsessive and curious. And it sounds a bit pithy to say that, but like I can't force people to learn, and there's too much to learn that's out there. So if someone's not following, you know, they're not reading, they're not following, they're not, taking courses, trying to learn on their own, then it's just not going to work at the end of the day. Because I'm not the expert in all the different disciplines, and I certainly, can't imagine to try. It would create risk if I was to be the one that had to learn everything for everybody, and it doesn't scale. And so for me, being obsessively curious is something that I look for, and ultimately, the next step is converting that into execution, right? Because you just can't be curious forever. You ultimately got to do something about it. And so those two things they can be a tug in terms of a personality, because you've got one where it's like aim first and one that's shoot first, but those all I need to see proof of execution and proof of curiosity.
Love it. Sometimes that's way more important than the technical capabilities. So thank you for sharing.
You can learn all that stuff.
Yeah. Nick, what about you? What about over at Unity?
I don't have much. I would just be using different words than what Guillermo just said on the interviews I do, which is like, are they actually passionate and interested about it, or are they just kind of in the grind? If work's a grind, it becomes pretty apparent, and it is a grind. But I'd love to hear Rosalinda's thoughts.
Thanks, Nick. So a couple thoughts on this. Like, I think that actually, I know this for a fact. So I left Suncor at the end of 2013, and I never got another job again. Nobody would hire me. And it got to the point that I even was working at Nordstrom, and they didn't even keep me. So, I think that when I look at all these tech companies, I'm like, I'm not good enough for you, blah, 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 but look at me creating this company. So, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. That's where I'm going with this. Cause I think that at the end of the day, how we hire at Red Iron is attitude over competencies. Cause we had this guy a few years ago, he was gathering some data. He was in the game scene, blah. And he asked us, he's like, because at the time there was still remember that discourse I told you about, that we need more people with skills and blah, 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 and all of that. And then we were like, we don't have problems hiring. We hire we all the time, people want to work with us. And then he reduced it to oh, okay, so you're depending on the excitement over this niche market to hire. And it's I didn't say anything at the time, but it's no, it's not a reduction of that. It's wanting the right people with the right attitude who may not have the qualifications, and we're not expecting them to stay with us for life, and we don't even expect them to only work with us. We love our team members to learn and grow and get their own clients, and I'm very transparent how we run the company, because this is how it is for me. I don't know what it would be for you, but this is the reality. So I don't necessarily think that although not to undermine the efforts of Lethbridge College, who have created those certificates at all, because we've definitely brought in people from Lethbridge to be part of our team because of those certificates. But it's the attitude over the qualifications is where I'm going with that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It seems like, you know, this industry is really, it's a different industry because there is that intersection between art and technology. So you're seeing a lot more creative hiring processes, which is really refreshing. So thank you all for sharing. We're at the end of our time, and I just wanted to thank every one of you for joining us for our very first webinar. We have a couple more coming up in the next couple months. Thank you so much to all of our speakers. It was so amazing to hear about all the amazing work you're doing in Alberta. We will share the recording if anyone would like to share it with friends or coworkers. And yeah, we hope to see you at some of our next in-person and virtual events.
September 14th here at Unity. Would love to have you guys.
Yeah. And September 28th in Edmonton. Can't wait, guys. Thanks everyone for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.